Welcome to another special edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the search for MH370. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and delighted to say once again we're joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey, who is a UK aerospace engineer who has taken Whisper technology, harnessed it, perfected it as a tracking tool for aircraft, and found a new location for MH370. Welcome, Richard.
Yeah, good afternoon, Jeffrey.
You on this Sunday afternoon or this Sunday. Um, let's start off with an update on Armada 7806, which is not
Yeah,
where we want it to be.
Armada 7806 will arrive back in Singapore in 2 days' time on the 8th of April. And very interesting that Armada 7806 stopped on the way home to Singapore for about 10 hours or just a bit more in what appears to have been an AUV exercise. This was just before it passed through the Sunda Strait, and it moved a bit outside of the shipping lane and spent 10 hours doing an AUV exercise. It kind
Hmm.
of reminded me of the AUV exercise that they did just north of Mauritius when they left Mauritius for the search area.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
wonder
Interesting.
what wonder what they were up to
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll remain probably another mystery in the long trail of mysteries. So let's get on to Captain Martyn Smith's observations. Just by way of introduction and for clarification, the observation by Captain Martyn Smith took place on the 8th of March 2014 UTC near a waypoint called MUTMI in the middle of the Indian Ocean. This was not MH370, which passed the same point 24 hours previously. Now, Richard, can you bring us up to date with your work on his observations?
Yeah, we believe that this sighting was of a U.S. Navy aircraft based out of Diego Garcia. Of course, as soon as you mention Diego Garcia in certain MH370 circles, the conspiracy theorists come out and they are now claiming we have proven that MH370 was diverted to Diego Garcia. Well, that's not what we've proven. They're wrong. The US Navy aircraft were based out of Diego Garcia, but MH370 never went anywhere near Diego Garcia. This waypoint MUTMI is 1,244 nautical miles from Diego Garcia. Anyway, on closer examination, we detected three aircraft flying together from Diego Garcia, and they were following the assumed flight path of MH370 near this waypoint MUTMI. And they followed it for 4 hours further southwards towards a MH370 crash location at around 36 degrees south, 93.3 degrees east. And we're showing you a screenshot with the whisper detections both of EK407 from Melbourne to Dubai on the 8th of March and of the US lead aircraft, which we called XX, out of Diego Garcia. So it came across from Diego Garcia, about 1,200 nautical miles, turned south and followed what the experts back then, Boeing, Inmarsat, the NTSB from the US, had assumed was the crash location for MH370 at 36 degrees south, 93.3 degrees east. Incidentally, that area was exactly the area that Armada 7806 was mapping recently before it left for Singapore. So just wanted to note that one in passing.
So now, Richard, look, I know you've covered this before, but we need to sort of probably cover it again. How did the US Navy know where to look just 24 hours after the disappearance of MH370?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's being asked by a lot of people. How could they possibly so quickly have known that where to look for MH370? What did they know at that point in time? And we're talking about less than 24 hours after the disappearance. So, to answer that question, you have to go back to the Air France 447 accident in 2009. There was a guy called Alan Shuster Bruce, who is now retired, but he was the manager of aeronautical product engineering at Inmarsat. And he explained that the loss of Air France 447 in 2009 prompted Inmarsat to enhance its satellite communication system. What Bruce worked out is from the so-called burst timing offset, the BTO, which is a measure from the satellite system, you could work out the distance of an aircraft from their satellite. In this case, they had a satellite above the Indian Ocean. They have a network of satellites around the globe. And the BTO measures the time it takes for a signal to go from the ground station up to the satellite, back down to the aircraft, and all the way back again to the ground station. So we know exactly which Inmarsat satellite was used. We know exactly where it was at any point in time. We know obviously where the ground station is. So we can work out from that exactly how far the aircraft was at any point in time away from the satellite. And then in 2011, Inmarsat upgraded their ground station software so that they could log additional SATCOM metadata, as they call it, which included the BTO and the BFO. The BTO is the burst timing offset, the BFO, the burst frequency offset. And both of those items of data became crucial in reconstructing the flight path for MH370.
So Inmarsat already had the BTO and BFO data from MH370 on the day it disappeared. Can you explain how BTO and BFO work?
Yeah, it can be quite complicated, the explanation, but I will try and make it an easy one. Radio signals travel at the speed of light, and we know where the ground station is, we know where the satellite is, and we know how long the round trip of that satellite radio signal, the BTO, would take to cover the total distance. So you can subtract the distance of the ground station to the satellite from the total distance, and what you're left with is the distance of the aircraft from the satellite. And that allows you to draw an arc on a map of the globe. And there are 7 points in time where we have this BTO data, and therefore there are 7 arcs which we've drawn on a map. The BFO is a bit more complicated. That gives you the frequency shift, which results from the Doppler effect. Everyone knows when a train passes through a station and it blows its whistle, the frequency changes from when the train's coming towards you to when the train's going away from you, or a siren from an emergency vehicle, the same thing. So you can work out the relative velocity between the satellite and the aircraft. We know the velocity of the satellite, it's moving all the time. So we can then determine the velocity of the aircraft. And I say velocity, not speed, because you have to do the calculation in three dimensions. It's not just latitude and longitude, but it's also altitude. If there's a change in altitude, that gives you a rate of climb or a rate of descent that is also part of the velocity calculation.
Now, just one question from an additional question to this. How do they know then that it was in the southern hemisphere, not the northern hemisphere?
Because when you map out the BTO and BFO data, it has a different pattern um, in the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. So that different pattern actually the assumed flight path of MH370 down to 36 degrees south, for instance, on the seventh arc, that matches exactly the southern hemisphere pattern, but it doesn't match the northern hemisphere pattern.
Mm. That was a question from a viewer. I threw it in. So now, Inmarsat, did they keep this information to themselves?
Nope. Mark Dickinson, who's the former manager of satellite operations at Inmarsat, explained that Inmarsat wasn't keeping the data to themselves. They were initially accused of that, but they were actually sharing their information with their industry partners and other experts since 2009. So this wasn't just a sharing which started in 2014.
Mm.
So industry partners were people like Lockheed Martin, who built the satellites, people like Boeing and Airbus, who have their Inmarsat SATCOM systems on board their aircraft, people like Thales or Honeywell, who build those systems on board aircraft, or the Space Engineering Division systems or Square Peg Communication Systems, who built the ground stations. So they were sharing with all of their partners. They also shared with the airline partners through the International Society for Aeronautical Telecommunications. That's called CETA. It's actually a French
Mm.
wording, so I won't try and speak the French bit. Um, but there are all the airlines are affiliated, and they all were informed. And of course, as soon as the MH370 investigation started officially, then Inmarsat informed the Air Accident Investigation Bureau in the UK and in Malaysia, the NTSB in the US, the ATSB in Australia, and the DSTG in Australia. So they were sharing information all the time.
If my memory serves me correctly, Richard, it took some time for Malaysia to be convinced it was in the southern Indian Ocean, though, didn't it?
Yeah, it's it's complicated stuff. So, but
Mm.
when you have a company like Inmarsat who are expert in satellite communication, I think you can bet your bottom dollar they did their homework and got it right.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, now, did Inmarsat make this information, this data public?
Yep. Inmarsat first publicly released the key data on MH370 on the 11th of March, so 3 days after the crash on the 8th. The initial publication was a preliminary analysis of the BTO data with these seven arcs or pings from the aircraft that I was talking about. The major enlightenment from that is that the aircraft carried on flying for 7 hours, 37 minutes. Um, on the 27th of May, a couple of months later, the entire file of the raw satellite communication log was also made public. And three guys from Inmarsat, Chris Ashton, Alan Shuster Bruce, Gary Colledge, and Mark Dickinson, also published the whole story about their investigation in the Journal of Navigation on the 4th of September, 2014. And you can read that most interesting paper. There's a link below.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be there. Just look below and you can click through to it. Um, was the BTO and BFO data independently verified?
Yep. And that's where the independent group
Ah,
comes into play. Uh, the independent group was started in April 2014 by a good friend of mine called Duncan Steel, who has a PhD in astrophysics and knows about satellites and satellite communication. He started a website, and I joined straight away, like many others. On the 10th of April, we already were emailing about the Inmarsat satellite data, and actually, we found out through that we came from the same, the neighbouring villages in Somerset in England. So
good
we
stuff.
became good friends
Yeah.
and shared a lot of history. Times of our misspent youth in various pubs in Somerset. Anyway, very soon Duncan attracted a number of experts from around the world, and we originally called ourselves the BFO group because we were looking in particular at the BFO, which was a bit more uh, uh, complicated and interesting than the BTO. But we soon changed the name to the Independent Group. And there's a link below to Duncan Steele's website. He no longer supports that website, but it's still there. And the archives he has on MH370 are still there to be seen. So very soon I published a spreadsheet with the Inmarsat satellite data from Duncan. He provided me with what is called the ephemeris, which is the detailed three-dimensional data on the location of the satellite at any point in time and its velocity at any point in time. And in that spreadsheet, I also show how the BTO and the BFO are calculated, and there's a link to that spreadsheet below. But the independent group, that was people like Mike Exner, who is a satellite communications expert and was the CEO of a satellite communication company. A Professor Yap Phuc Pha from Singapore Technical University, Henrik Rydberg from Sweden, Victor Unello, Barry Martin, all of these people built independently a model of the BTO and BFO data, and we compared results. And it was actually very fruitful. On the 19th of May 2014, the IG discovered the so-called eclipse effect on the satellite, which affected the BFO data. During eclipse periods, when the satellite passes through the Earth's shadow, the satellite temperature drops, and that results in variation in the translation frequency, which was interesting stuff. On the 12th of June 2014, we found a compensation error in the ground station software in a system called EAFC, which was subsequently corrected. And on the 17th of June 2014, the IG published its first report, and there are 10 names attached to that report. In total, the IG had 18 members back at that time, but some wished to remain anonymous.
So how does that affect the data which was used on the 8th of March 2014?
Well, the BTO data, which is what Bruce was using from Inmarsat, was not affected at all. So Inmarsat very quickly had the BTO data, and which produced the seventh arc, and they had then shared that with Boeing and NTSB, who had produced their initial flight path because Boeing knew how much fuel was on board, how far it could fly, and so Boeing modeled the flight path. Inmarsat added the seventh arc data and the other arcs in between that the MH370 flight had to pass through at the appropriate time. And very quickly they were able to publish that data. They didn't use the BFO data at that point. That was used later when the data was corrected for the EAFC and the eclipse effect. But all of that story is in the Inmarsat paper that I mentioned earlier, so you can read up the whole history.
Right. So, Richard, what are the next steps with the tracking of these interesting aeroplanes?
Well, having accepted the data was available from Boeing and from Inmarsat,
Mm.
and that the U.S. Navy were informed on that basis by the NTSB or by Boeing, other parties, then what I want to do is to track these unidentified aircraft, all three of them, uh, all the way to the MH370 search area, where they would have arrived about 4 hours later, just after daybreak. And if you're going to do a surface search, you normally plan to arrive at first light, and you continue until it gets dark. So on my tracking, the next waypoint after MUTMI, which was used by the US Navy aircraft, was a waypoint called Bebin, Bebim. And that is only 119 nautical miles from Cocos Islands, that has a nice international airport. So I would also be interested to know if there were any P-8 Poseidon aircraft, for example, refueling in the Cocos Islands airport that night. Um, Obviously, a flight without a flight pan is going to be a bit difficult to research, but there may have been somebody locally in the Cocos Islands who spotted a rather strange aircraft or unusual aircraft landing at the airport. The P-8 Poseidon has a range of around 4,500 nautical miles, but it can be refueled in the air by a KC-135 tanker aircraft. And a commentator on my website by the name of Ventus45 has posted a lengthy analysis of this incident and goes through the incident in minute detail. And it makes fascinating reading. It's almost like reading a spy novel or an intelligence report. In
Mm.
addition, Captain Martyn Smith has also posted a comment on my website on the 3rd of April about Jeff Wise. Accuses Jeff Wise of libeling him and accuses Jeff Wise of calling his observation a hoax. And Captain Martyn Smith concludes in his statement to Jeff Wise, if you wish to libel me again, at least have the balls to contact me first. And there's a link below to the statement from Captain Martyn Smith. So I think somehow this observation and this story is going to unfold in the coming weeks, step by step, and it's
Mm.
quite fascinating for me.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard, for all that research. Um, our viewers, tomorrow we're going to be looking at questions that you've asked us. There's some great ones there. A few folks have thanked us very much for answering their questions. A few others have said, why haven't you answered my question? We're getting to it. Richard, you'd be delighted to know that you had a marriage proposal as well, although the lady doesn't want her name mentioned.
Oh
So,
gosh.
so we won't mention it. Um,
Yes,
so,
I saw that and saw the smiley after the proposal, but
yeah,
well,
very nice
that's
touch.
lovely. Thank you.
But we also must say we do love all your very positive comments. You're obviously really enjoying the show. And it's great to be giving you all this information and keeping you up to date with what's going on. So tomorrow it's questions. So thank you very much indeed for watching. Please subscribe to us. Please like us. Keep those questions coming. And once again, Richard, thank you very much indeed for all your work. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.